I am Hailey Norcrest, a 31 years old woman. I'm a set decorator in Burbank, California, and 2 years ago, my sister bought a $300,000 studio apartment in my name so she could hide it from her fiancé. I turned it into something she never expected, and neither did I. The last time I saw Brooke before everything unraveled, we were sitting outside at Porto's in Glendale, the kind of place that smelled like powdered sugar and ambition. She was late, as always, but she made up for it with a $14 almond croissant and sunglasses that looked like they cost more than my rent. She greeted me like I was her assistant, 2 kisses, a flick of her wrist, and then, "Hailey, you look artistic. That jacket's kind of vintage exhausted, but it works on you." I smiled tight, bit my tongue. The jacket wasn't vintage, it was from a set. I'd borrowed it from wardrobe because I hadn't had time to do laundry after an overnight shoot. She didn't know that, of course. Brooke never knew the details, just the surface. She sipped her oat milk latte and talked about Brian, her fiancé, a venture capitalist who called me Holly the last time we met, and how she was managing expectations around their prenup, whatever that meant. Then, without ceremony, she reached into her oversized tote and slid a small manila folder across the table. A silver key peeked out from underneath. "This is going to sound weird," she said, "but I need you to put a property in your name just temporarily." I blinked. "What?" She exhaled like she was exhausted by how slow I was. "I bought a studio, cash, but I can't have it traced to me right now, not with the prenup still being negotiated. Brian's lawyers are sharks, and let's be honest, your credit's spotless. You're the perfect ghost." The words hit me like a bucket of water, cold, fast. "You want me to hold property for you, like legally?" "It's just a shell," she said, chewing daintily on her croissant. "No one's going to live in it. It'll stay empty, no risk, you won't even have to think about it." I stared at her. What if something happens? Taxes, insurance. She waved it off. "I'll cover everything, you won't see a dime in bills." I should have said no. God, I should have said no. But Brooke had this way of making you feel like saying no meant disappointing the entire universe. And maybe, a tiny part of me, the part that still remembered her brushing my hair when I cried in middle school, wanted to prove I could be useful. I took the key, signed the folder. And just like that, I owned a studio in North Hollywood. It was 3 weeks later when I drove to see it for the first time. I told myself it was just curiosity, wanting to know what I'd gotten roped into, but in truth, it was anxiety. Brooke hadn't answered a single one of my texts since that lunch, not one. She ghosted me, radio silent. Even Brian had called once, voice tight and clipped. "Have you seen her? She said she was with you." I lied. "Yeah, we got lunch last week." The studio was on the second floor of a stucco building near Vineland. Clean, modern, just slightly too glossy. The kind of place real estate agents call up and coming. It smelled like fresh paint and desperation. I opened the door with the key she gave me. It was empty, stark white walls, hardwood floors, one tall window that let in a slice of afternoon light like a spotlight on the bare space. I stood there in the silence, hands in my pockets, heart pounding. And then I noticed the letter on the counter. It was a water bill addressed to me. No auto pay, no cover from Brooke, just my name, my liability. Panic rose in my throat like smoke. I sat on the floor, staring at that bill, wondering how I'd been so stupid. How Brooke had looped me into whatever scheme she was running with Brian. Why she thought I'd just play along forever. I stayed there for hours, just sitting, trying to figure out what to do next. That's when I got the text from Maribel. Well, technically, it was from a group chat. The kind film crew PAs use when someone's car breaks down or a last-minute location falls through. "Maribel, couchsurfing again. Anyone got a spot for the night? She's been working doubles." I stared at the message for a long time, then I typed. "I have a studio, it's empty, safe. She can crash there for a few days if she wants." That was the beginning. She arrived with 2 duffel bags and a look of sheer exhaustion. I gave her the air mattress from my storage unit and a box of tea. She didn't ask questions, just said thank you and fell asleep with the blinds half closed. I sat by the window that night, watching her sleep in a space that didn't feel like mine, but also didn't feel like Brooke anymore either. It felt open, like a pause in the universe. The next day, I brought over a folding table and 2 chairs, left a pack of granola bars in the cabinet, bought a set of towels from the 99 cents only store. Maribel stayed a week. And in that week, something inside me began to shift. I had spent my entire life being temporary in everyone else's world, a helper, a fixer, a placeholder. But here, in this empty shell Brooke dumped on me, I had power, not status, not money, but the kind of quiet power that comes from unlocking a door for someone who needs it. And that was just the beginning. Because one night, Maribel brought someone else. Her name was Zara. She was tiny, jittery, all nerves and noise. She had a bruise on her chin and didn't meet my eyes. She just needs a few nights, Maribel whispered. Her boyfriend kicked her out, please. I said yes. We moved the air mattress to the corner, brought in a second set of sheets. Zora cried herself to sleep that night. I didn't sleep at all. I just sat on the floor, holding my knees to my chest, wondering what the hell I'd just started. But I didn't stop it. I couldn't. Brooke hadn't called, not once, not to check on the property, not to ask about her precious technicality. And so I kept the door open. One woman became 2. Then 3. Then 4. And every time I thought this is too much, someone would look at me with those eyes, wide, terrified, hopeful, and I'd find a way to make room. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Because I knew how it sounded: illegal, unsafe, unreasonable. But it wasn't any of those things. It was necessary. And it was only a matter of time before Brooke came back. Not with gratitude, but with fury. And when she did, when she saw what I'd turned her secret into, the war began. The knock came on a Saturday afternoon. It wasn't the soft, unsure knock of someone needing help. It was hard, sharp, the kind that made your ribs clench before your brain even registered why. I was rearranging sleeping mats. Maribel had gone to pick up a friend from Burbank Station when the buzzer screamed through the studio like a siren. Zara flinched, dropped the cereal box she was holding. I stood still. Then came the voice through the intercom, cold, familiar, acid-laced with disbelief. Hailey, open the door now. My body responded before my mind did. I walked slowly to the door, pressed the button, and buzzed her in. Brooke stormed up the stairs like a woman possessed. Tight jeans, stiletto boots, a designer crossbody slung like ammunition across her chest. Her hair was too perfect for this street, her anger too loud for this space. The moment she stepped inside, the entire room shifted. She froze. Not because it was dirty, it was. We cleaned constantly, it was our ritual, our dignity. But because it wasn't hers anymore. Not the white walls she'd chosen, or the minimalist light fixture she probably thought of as Scandinavian chic. No. This place pulsed with life. 4 bunk beds lined the walls, folded blankets sat in wire baskets. A chalkboard read, "Welcome, you're safe now." Maribel had written it in pink and green chalk last week. There was a kettle on the hot plate, books stacked near the couch, a tiny paper star hanging from the smoke detector. And women not hiding, not cowering. Living. Zora stood near the kitchenette. Liana peeked from the bathroom. Carly sat cross-legged on her mattress, headphones pulled down, brows furrowed. Brooke's eyes snapped to me. What the hell is this? I didn't flinch, it's exactly what it looks like. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You're squatting, you turned my investment into a flop house. It's not a flop house. You lied to me, you said you'd keep it empty. No, I said slowly, you said that, I just didn't stop you. Brooke let out a strangled laugh, the kind that barely contains a scream. Do you have any idea what this looks like if Brian finds out I'm connected to this? He already left you, I snapped before I could stop myself. You told me. Her face flickered just for a second, then the mask returned. You're done, Hailey, I'm calling the police. I'm calling a lawyer, you're trespassing, all of you. You can't, Carly said from her mattress, quiet but firm. Her name on the deed, it's her place. Brooke's eyes went wide. What? I reached into the drawer and pulled out the folder, the same one she'd handed me at Porto. I flipped to the title page and held it up. Hailey Norcrest, I said, owner of record, as of the day you signed it over. Brooke took 2 slow steps back like she'd been hit in the chest. "This is temporary," she whispered. "It was, then you vanished, and I paid the water bill and the internet. And then I kept the heat on during that awful January storm. And guess what? After 6 months, that's not helping out anymore. That's occupying, that's ownership, that's standing." She stared at me like she didn't recognize my face. And maybe she didn't. Because I wasn't the girl who said yes out of guilt anymore. I wasn't the little sister looking for her permission. I was the woman who turned her loophole into a life raft. Brooke turned to the others, her voice went brittle. "You're all using me, you're leeching off my money, my resources." "No," Maribel said quietly, stepping through the door with a grocery bag. "We're breathing. For the first time in a long time." Brooke's eyes narrowed. "This ends now. I'll file suit Monday. Fraud, misuse of property, emotional distress." "Do it," I said. The words were heavier than I expected, but they felt right. "Call your lawyer, call 10, I'll be ready." She scoffed, turned, heels clicking like gavel strikes on the wood floor. At the door, she hesitated. "This wasn't yours, Hailey, you stole it." "No," I said, "I built it." She slammed the door behind her. In silence fell. I stood frozen, heart thudding in my throat. Then Liana spoke for the first time all week. "You okay?" I nodded, "Yeah." But I was terrified. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the floor by the window and opened my laptop. I started a Google Doc. Title: The Still House, Mission and Values. I didn't know why I called it that, it just felt right. Still, as in safe, as in unmoving, as in here. I wrote, "This is not a shelter, it is not temporary, it is not shameful. This is a place for breath. A place for healing. A place to begin again." I added a new line under that. It began with a lie. It became a home. The next morning I called Nora. She was a friend of a friend, a legal aid attorney who handled housing disputes. We worked together once on a commercial set. When I told her everything, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said, "You have a case." My knees buckled a little. "You mean I'm not criminally liable?" "No, not even close. Your sister used your name for an off-the-books purchase. There's no legal rental agreement. You've paid expenses, managed the property, provided shelter. That's called beneficial ownership. It's messy, but you're not powerless." I let out a shaky breath. She added, "But if she sues, you'll need more than receipts. You'll need witnesses, statements, proof of service." I looked around at the room, the women folding blankets, stirring oatmeal, brushing hair in a cracked mirror. "I think I've got that," I said. We started gathering evidence. Utilities, text threads, photos. And then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I posted online. Not to go viral, not for pity. Just a simple message in a private film crew group. "If you or anyone you know needs a crash pad, safe, clean, no questions, we have a space in North Hollywood. Women only, no rent, just rest." The DMs poured in. One said, "Does this place have a name?" I typed back before I could second guess. "It's called the Still House." By the time we hit the end of the month, there were 5 of us sleeping inside the studio and 7 more on rotation, women coming and going, some staying a night, some a week, all of them wrapped in a kind of silent, aching relief. The place smelled like peppermint tea, donated detergent, and the ghost of worry that clung to every pillow. I didn't sleep much. There was always someone crying in the bathroom at 2 a.m., or whispering to their mom on speakerphone from the balcony, or quietly folding laundry in the dark because it made them feel human again. And I stayed up with them. I started to learn their rhythms, their stories, their softness under the trauma. I kept track in a notebook. Who needed tampons, who liked jasmine tea, who flinched when someone closed a door too fast. One night Maribel said, "This place doesn't feel temporary." And I whispered back, "That's the point." The name stuck. The Still House. The quiet between the storms. Then the email came. Subject line: "Notice to vacate immediately." From Law Offices of Safran and Lot LLP. I read it 3 times, standing by the fridge in my pajamas, hands shaking. Zora saw my face and grabbed my wrist. "Is it Brooke?" I nodded. The letter was pure Brooke manicured rage behind legal jargon. They claimed the studio was being misused, that it had become a transient lodging facility, that I was in breach of informal verbal contract. The best part. They demanded I vacate within 14 days. Or face litigation. I emailed the notice to Nora and spent the next hour breathing into a paper bag behind the closet door. Because despite the strength I had found, despite the small miracles on bunk beds and soup cans and whispered prayers, I was still scared. Brooke had money. Brooke had lawyers. All I had was a key I shouldn't have signed for and the trust of a few women who had nowhere else to go. But Nora didn't flinch. She emailed me back that night with 3 words, "Let's fight this." We started organizing. I created a spreadsheet. Names, dates, notes. Carly helped. She'd been a bartender before this, had an insane memory for details and a natural gift for logistics. We tracked everything: nights slept, meals served, cleaning shifts. We weren't just a shelter anymore. We were a system. The women kept showing up. One was Dia, a production assistant I'd seen once on set. Her landlord had ghosted and changed the locks. She arrived with 2 grocery bags, a ukulele, and a tight smile. She slept in the corner near the window and started waking up early to mop the floor because she said it calmed her anxiety. Another was Carly herself. She never left. She'd been kicked out of her girlfriend's place after a fight turned violent. At first, she barely spoke. Then one day, she cracked a joke about my hair looking like sad librarian chic, and we never stopped laughing. The bonds weren't fast, they were slow-cooked, earned. No one asked for backstories, but when the stories came, we held them carefully, like hot tea. One day, I made a group text. "Still house court." That was the day we became official, at least to each other. We posted new rules on the fridge. No loud phone calls after 10 p.m. Everyone gets a say. No questions unless they're kind. You don't have to smile here, but you're allowed to. We laughed when we added that last one, but we meant it. Then someone leaked the story. I don't know who, I didn't ask. Maybe it was a journalist in one of the housing forums I had posted in. Maybe it was someone who stayed with us and couldn't keep it secret anymore. All I know is one night, we were eating spaghetti off paper plates, and the next morning my phone had exploded. Texts, emails, missed calls. The subject line of the article: "Inside LA's secret shelter, a film set decorator transforms her sister's studio into a refuge for women." It was raw, beautiful. The journalist never used real names. She had visited under the radar, spoken with the women quietly, respectfully. She described the smell of the tea, the notes on the fridge, the faint lavender paint we'd used to soften the walls. But she didn't hide the truth. She called out Brooke. And suddenly, I was a headline. Brooke, of course, lost it. She posted a furious Instagram story about personal betrayal and exploitation. She hired a PR rep. She tried to bury the article with legal threats. But the article had already gone viral. And with it came support. Women's groups, nonprofits, lawyers, people offering money, furniture, food. An influencer reposted it with a caption: "Give this woman the key to the city." We received over $9,000 in donations in 48 hours. I cried when I saw the GoFundMe page someone else had made, with a photo of the studio window and the quote: "You don't have to smile here, but you're allowed to." But there were also risks. The building inspector came. I stood outside shaking while he walked through the unit, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing at every outlet and extension cord. He didn't shut us down, but he handed me a 2-page list. Smoke detectors, exit signage, updated locks, carbon monoxide alarms. I read the list like scripture. We spent 3 days fixing everything. Liana painted new signs, Dia installed the alarms, Carly found cheap locks on Craigslist. Still House wasn't just legal now. It was legit. Then Nora called. "We have a hearing," she said, "in 3 weeks. My stomach dropped. "Brooke is filing for ownership reclamation and damages," she continued. "But I've reviewed everything, the judge will see through her." We prepped for court like it was a film shoot. I organized witnesses. Maribel, Carly, Dia, even Zara agreed, though she was nervous. We practiced their statements, rehearsed their stories, cried through most of it. But the night before the hearing, we didn't rehearse. We just lit candles. Each woman lit one and spoke a word into the room. Freedom, peace, survival, safety, hope. When it was my turn, I paused, then whispered, home. And we sat there, 6 women on mattresses, our faces flickering with light, knowing tomorrow could change everything. But also knowing, even if we lost in court, we had already won something deeper. Each other. The courthouse smelled like old paper and fear. I wore the only blazer I owned, a navy thrift store find that still had someone else's perfume faintly clinging to the collar. Carly offered to lend me her boots, but I wore my sneakers. I needed to feel like myself. We arrived early. Dia, Maribel, and Zara came in a lift an hour later, clutching her tote bag like a shield. Liana didn't testify, but she came anyway, silently holding up a cardboard sign with a painted lemon tree that read, "Still here." Brooke arrived 20 minutes late. She walked in like she was stepping onto a film set, tailored charcoal slacks, low bun, her signature trench. No emotion, just cold calculation. Her lawyer looked exactly how you'd imagine, slicked back hair, perfectly rehearsed outrage, armed with binders and bulleted accusations. When Brooke sat down across from me, she didn't look once in my direction. Not once. The hearing was supposed to be routine, a motion to vacate, filed under improper occupancy and misuse of private property. But Nora turned it into something else. A story. And stories change everything. She began with the deed, the one Brooke signed in my name under the pretense of sheltering assets during her prenup process. She pulled up the texts, Brooke's own words, "You won't even have to go there, it'll stay empty." Then Nora handed the judge my utility records, 6 months of payments made in my name, groceries, repairs, receipts. And then she called Maribel. My heart lodged in my throat. Maribel wore a black turtleneck and jeans, no makeup. She took the stand with a steadiness I didn't know she had. She told them about the night she arrived, the cold, the exhaustion, the way I opened the door with a mug of tea and no questions. She talked about how she'd stayed 2 nights, then 5, then forgot how to leave. I wasn't a tenant, she said. I was a person who needed to breathe, and Hailey gave me that air. The courtroom was quiet. Even Brooke's lawyer didn't cross-examine. Then Dia testified. She told the court about waking up in a car parked behind Yvonne's, about hearing the still house through whispers from a lighting tech on set. I showed up with nothing, she said. I left with everything. Zara was last. She shook as she walked to the stand. I wanted to wrap her in a blanket and pull her back into safety, but she stood tall. Her voice cracked, but she said what mattered. I was scared of everyone, but Hailey didn't ask me to explain. She just handed me a blanket and said, "You don't have to smile here." The judge asked no questions, just nodded. Then Brooke took the stand. Her voice was confident, clean. She claimed she was generous, blindsided, emotionally manipulated. I gave her the studio as a temporary favor, she said. This was never meant to be permanent, and now she's turned it into some cult of trauma, and I'm being vilified for it. She looked at the judge, eyes wide, polished, practiced. Your Honor, I just want my property back. I didn't speak. Nora did. She stood slowly, turned to face the court and said, Your Honor, I ask you to consider what property is, legally and morally. If someone gives you a house and never returns, never pays, never contributes, at what point does ownership shift from ink to intention? My client didn't just live here, she gave life here. And dozens of women, none of whom had anything to gain, came forward to say the same. The judge leaned forward. The court finds substantial evidence that the property was gifted, misrepresented, and abandoned. The legal principle of equitable ownership applies. The court recognizes Hailey Norcrest as sole and rightful owner of the North Hollywood property, retroactively and going forward. Just like that. It was done. Brooke gasped, not dramatically, but like the wind had been knocked out of her. She stood up, knocked over her water, and stormed out. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I felt her absence like a clean break. Back at the studio, Carly had baked boxed brownies and spelled U1 in marshmallows on the tray. We didn't throw a party. We lit candles. Each woman took a flame and whispered something into the room. Thank you. We're safe. Finally. I believe in us. I didn't speak. I just stood in the doorway, watching the shadows flicker across the bunks in mural and taped-up affirmations, and I thought. She called it a cult of trauma. But what we'd built, wasn't a cult. It was a cathedral. The days that followed moved in waves. We received more press, a second article, a podcast interview. People began calling the still house the underground refuge that won the courtroom. I started a website. I uploaded photos, not of faces, never that, but of hands folding laundry, tea kettles, chalk drawings, doorknobs polished by hope. People sent donations. Someone from Michigan messaged asking how to start one in her town, then another from Flagstaff, then Missouri. I built a Google folder, intake forms, safety protocols, best practices. I labeled it Stillhouse Blueprint. I sent it to anyone who asked. We didn't gatekeep healing. The first new house opened in Northern California, run by a woman named Noel. She sent us a photo, bunkies, string lights, a lemon tree planted in a pot outside the door. Her note said, "You saved me before we met, now I want to do the same." I cried for hours after reading that. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was seen. I was Brooke's shadow anymore. I was a light passed hand to hand. Then one night, I returned to the studio after picking up groceries to find an envelope taped to the door. My name, sharp handwriting, familiar. Inside, a letter. From our mother. She'd seen the story, read the court ruling, listened to the podcast. And for the first time in a year, she apologized. Not for what she said, but for what she didn't say. You needed me to believe you, she wrote. And I didn't even try. I chose the daughter who looked polished. But you're the one who stayed, you're the one who made a home. That night, I lit a candle and placed the letter on the wall. Below it, I wrote a new affirmation on a sticky note. You don't have to be chosen to be right. And I believed it. The next few weeks felt like quiet sunlight after a storm. I was still tired, still ducking emails from media outlets and city council members who wanted to talk collaboration. Still washing pillowcases and fixing broken curtain rods at 11 p.m., but something had shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. Because Brooke had tried and failed. And I had stood. Still. It started with an email from a woman named Lena. She was a librarian in Detroit. Her message was short. I'm tired of waiting for someone else to build what we need. Can you help me start a still house here? I called her that same day. Her voice was nervous but determined, the kind of shake that meant courage, not fear. She told me about the shelters in her area, overfilled, underfunded, often dangerous. She said she had a church basement, 6 sleeping bags, and a desperate need to do something. Then you've got enough to start, I said. She cried. I sent her the folder, the intake forms, the safety protocols, the what we've learned so far doc Carly had put together. And then I added one more thing, a scanned photo of our original stillhouse wall, the names, the notes, the lemon tree sketch. I told her to start her own version, her own wall, her own heartbeat. Within 2 weeks she did. She sent a photo of 3 women gathered around a bulletin board lit by fairy lights. The message on the board said, "You made it, you're not alone." Stillhouse Detroit had been born. I didn't feel pride. I felt faith. Then came the parcel. It arrived in a nondescript box with no return address. I opened it on the floor of the original studio, surrounded by Zara and Carly and Dia, the kind of night where we were eating instant noodles and passing around a single bag of popcorn like communion. Inside, 30 tiny jars. Each hand-labeled. Each filled with a candle. The tag said things like, Night 1. The cry that didn't break me. Still breathing. The bunk by the window. There was no note, just the scent of lavender and eucalyptus and something I couldn't name but felt like memory. We lined them along the windowsill and lit them slowly. The room glowed like a cathedral. Carly whispered, "Do you think she made them?" "Who?" I asked. "The woman who left in March, the one with the braid and the music box. Remember, she said she was gonna start over in Oakland." I thought about that woman, about all the women, and realized I'd stopped keeping count. Not because they didn't matter, but because they didn't need numbers. They had names. They had rooms. They had space inside me. One day, I walked into the original studio and stopped cold. Someone had written on the name wall. In clean, neat handwriting, familiar. It read, "Brooke Norcrest, I was lost, I found her again." I stared at it for 10 minutes, fingers grazing the edge. I didn't know when she'd come. No one had seen her. No one had heard a knock. But she'd been here. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. Like something heavy I'd been dragging behind me had finally dissolved. I didn't call her. Didn't text. But I added my own note beneath hers. "You don't have to say it, I heard it anyway." That same week, I got an email from a producer. She wanted to option my story. A streaming docuseries, interviews, a narrative arc, she called it. I stared at the proposal for a long time. It was flattering, it was generous. And it didn't feel right. Because what I had built wasn't a story for screens. It was a shelter for souls. I wrote back politely, "Not yet, maybe not ever, but thank you." And then I closed my laptop and went downstairs to fix a broken lock on the bathroom door. Because that's what Stillhouse required. Not flash, but presence. The idea for expansion began over pancakes. Carly and I were sitting in a cafe near Griffith Park, sharing notes about bunk spacing and whispering about our dream, a place with rooms, actual rooms, doors, a garden, a kitchen with 2 burners. She looked up at me halfway through her coffee and said, "What if we go bigger?" I stared. "How big?" "Like duplex big, yard big, startorial program big." My stomach fluttered. I'd thought about it, of course I had. But saying it aloud made it real. We went home that night and started sketching. Liana drew the floor plan, Carly researched real estate. And within 2 weeks, we were touring a duplex in Highland Park. 2 bedrooms, a detached garage, a mess of a yard overtaken by weeds and broken bricks. But I could see it. I could see it. Women planting tomatoes, shared meals on the patio, wind chimes, bunk beds that didn't squeak, a back door with a chalkboard that read, "Welcome, you made it." We put in an offer. Scraped every donation we had. And somehow we got it. Stillhouse was about to grow. The night before closing, we held a quiet celebration in the studio. No fanfare, just candles, tea, soft music. One by one, the women lit a flame and said one word they hoped would live in the new house. Kindness. Quiet. Freedom. Recovery. Family. Light. I was last. I stood at the window where it had all started and said, "Beginning." Because that's what this had always been. Not the end of a story. The beginning of so many. The next morning I walked through the duplex alone, keys in hand. The sunlight poured through the windows in messy streaks. The air smelled like dust and dried lemons. I could feel the ghosts of what it used to be, but more than that, I could feel what it could become. I turned to the wall near the entry. Blank. Waiting. And I smiled. Because I knew what would go there first. A sign. Just 4 words. Hand-painted by someone who had once come to my door shaking and left standing tall. "You're not a burden." We opened the Highland Park duplex on a Sunday. The paint hadn't fully dried in the hallway and we still didn't have cabinet handles in the kitchen, but the door was unlocked. The lights worked. The bunks were made. We had tea, bread, and 5 women already scheduled to move in that week. The front porch had a soft creak to it, one of those sounds you don't realize you'll come to love until the 100th time you hear it. Liana had painted a sunflower mural over the mailbox. Carly taped up a printed sign near the front steps. "This is not a shelter, it's a starting line." I read that over and over again as we waited for our first guest. Her name was Noel. She arrived with 1 duffel bag, a small potted plant, and eyes like she hadn't slept in months. She didn't speak at first, just looked around the yard, the freshly swept porch, the wide windows. And then she said, almost to herself, "This doesn't feel like I'm hiding." We brought her inside, gave her the bed near the back window and a lemon-scented pillowcase. That night she made tea for the whole house. No one had asked her to. She just moved around the kitchen like someone remembering who she was. In the following weeks, Noel became a fixture. She spent her mornings in the backyard, clearing weeds, lining the perimeter with bricks she found buried in the dirt, planting seeds in neat, hopeful rows. She talked to the lemon tree every day. And once, while she was watering the basil, I asked her what she used to do. She said, "Teach kindergarten." I smiled. "That makes sense. What gave me away?" "You're calm in a way that's contagious." She looked at me and said, "No one's called me calm in years." That night she placed a tiny jar of honey on the counter with a note, "For the rough mornings." And she signed it, N. But it wasn't long before the world found her again. I was sitting in the kitchen doing intake paperwork when a black SUV pulled up outside. At first, I thought it was another donor drop-off or a volunteer. But when the woman stepped out with a badge clipped to her belt and a notebook in her hand, I knew something was wrong. She introduced herself as Detective Mia Ramirez. "I need to speak with Noel Jameson." My heart dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's safe, but we've located her ex-husband. He violated parole. She's a key witness in the upcoming hearing." I called Noel out to the porch. She listened quietly, arms crossed, jaw tight. When the detective left, she didn't cry, she didn't speak. She just stood in the sunlight for a long time, hands trembling. Then she said, "I have to go back to testify." I nodded. "I'll come with you." "You don't have to." "I know, that's why I'm going." She looked at me for a long moment. And then she broke. Right there on the porch. I held her until the sun went down. The motel in Reno was beige and smelled like old soap. Noel stared out the window for hours, watching traffic and breathing like each breath hurt. I wanted to take the fear from her and swallow it whole, but all I could do was sit on the carpet, cross-legged, and let her talk when she was ready. That night she told me everything. About the years of small bruises and big apologies. About the day she ran barefoot down a grocery store aisle just to escape his voice echoing through produce. About the last time she saw her children. "He told them I was crazy," she whispered. "He said I abandoned them." My eyes blurred with rage. "They'll know the truth," I said. She shook her head. "I'm not doing this for them anymore, I'm doing it for me." The hearing was brutal. The defense tried to paint her as hysterical, unreliable, a runaway. But Noel stood like a lighthouse in a hurricane. She told the truth. All of it. And when the judge sentenced him to 6 years for repeated violations and intimidation, she didn't smile. She just exhaled. Like a weight she'd forgotten was still on her back had finally lifted. We returned to Highland Park 2 days later. The lemon tree was blooming. The women had made welcome signs. There were cookies on the counter, a pair of slippers by her bed. Noel didn't cry. But she lit a candle on the porch and whispered, "Still here." She stayed for 2 more weeks. Then one morning, she came to the kitchen with a grin I'd never seen on her face. "I got the apartment," she said. "Wait, what?" "I'm moving to Glendale, my own space, upstairs unit above a laundromat." The whole house celebrated. That night we walked over together. It was small, cozy, windows that looked out at power lines and a cracked parking lot. But it was hers. Before I left, she showed me something on the windowsill, a tiny lemon tree planted in a teacup. And a note above it that read, "Still here, still growing." I didn't cry until I got home. Later that week, Carly, Dia, and I sat outside with tea and sketchpads. We started dreaming again. "What if we had a third house?" Carly asked. "Where?" I said. "Long Beach." "Santa Clarita," Dia offered, "or even the Valley." I laughed. "You realize we're building an empire of blankets and tea kettles, right?" "No," Carly said, "we're building an army of second chances." I wrote that down. Because it felt true. And it felt earned. That night, I stood at the wall of names in the original studio. I read every single card. Even Brooke. Then I added a new one. Noel J. testified, survived, planted joy. And below that, you are not what happened to you. The house was quiet. The lights dim. The air smelled like honey and clean sheets. And I thought to myself, this isn't a shelter. It's a sanctuary. It started with a question Carly asked me one morning over burnt toast and budget coffee. Hailey, what happens if we can't fit everyone? I didn't have an answer. Because we were full. Stillhouse Highland Park had 12 bunks, and the original studio downtown still housed 6 rotating women at any given time. Every week, I fielded dozens of messages, referrals from union groups, whispered recommendations, even strangers with nothing but hope, and a screenshot of a Google review that simply read, "Not a shelter, a second soul." And I hated turning anyone away. It cracked something deep inside me. So we had to grow. We had to build. We started touring new places, rentals, fixer-uppers, co-op spaces that reeked of bleach and potential. It was Carly who found the one on Cypress Avenue. 2 stories, a wraparound porch, overgrown lawn, chipped white paint. I remember walking through the front room, imagining where the bunks would go and thinking, this is going to be our biggest leap. I also remember the price tag. It was too much. Even with our donations, even with Nora offering to file all the paperwork for free, we were short by tens of thousands. I sat on the floor of the empty space that night, staring at the water stains on the ceiling and whispering to no one in particular. If I ask again, if I make another post, will they still care? Because that was my fear. That we had used up all the kindness. That our story had gone quiet. That the world had moved on. But I made the post. I wrote it late at night, in a haze of exhaustion and shaky hope. We need to say yes to more women. We need a bigger door. If you believe in second chances, help us build one. The next morning, we had $27,000 in our account. By the end of the week, $62,000. And that wasn't the most beautiful part. The most beautiful part was the notes. This is for the woman I couldn't save. In honor of my sister, who never had a place like this. Tell them someone in Vermont is rooting for them. People donated in names, for names, because of names. And so we bought the house. Stillhouse Cypress was real. And it was ours. The day we moved in, Carly brought champagne and paper cups. We toasted barefoot on the porch. Dia cried. Zara planted lavender in the front beds and called it Hope Row. And I, for the first time in months, sat alone in the upstairs room and let the tears fall quietly. Not out of fear. Not even relief. But honor. Because the house didn't feel like mine. It felt like ours. All of ours. The first woman to move in was Joy. 54 years old, soft-spoken, wore lipstick even when she had nowhere to be. She spent the past year living out of a friend's garage after losing her son to suicide. She barely talked. But she cleaned. Joy would wipe the tables down 3 times a day, fold towels like origami and leave notes like, "I made chamomile for whoever needs to rest. If the world feels loud, check the garden." Still standing. And then one night she opened up. We were sitting under a string of lights Zara had hung, the garden still warm from the sun, and Joy whispered, "I thought I'd be forgotten by now." I took her hand, "Not here." She nodded. "That's what makes this place different. It sees the invisible." That stuck with me. I added it to the Stillhouse guidebook under our core values. We see the invisible. We honor the quiet. We build safety that doesn't expire. Then came the wall. We'd done it at the other locations, corkboard walls filled with notes, names, affirmations. But this one needed to be bigger. So Liana painted the entire hallway wall in chalkboard black, floor to ceiling, 8 feet wide, a space not just for messages, but for legacy. At the top in pale white cursive she wrote, "I was here, I still am." Women wrote under it in colored chalk, "I'm not broken, I'm becoming." I left with a backpack, I'm leaving with a backbone. I slept here, I woke up whole. Thank you for knowing I was worth the space. Every time I passed that wall I had to pause. Because those words, they were proof. Proof that something as simple as a room, a bunk, a place to sit in silence could reshape a woman's life. One afternoon, a man came to the porch. Early 50s, neatly dressed, nervous. He asked for Joy. I almost said no. But she stepped out before I could answer. They stared at each other. He held out a folded letter. From your son, he said, before he passed. Joy didn't cry. She just took the letter, held it to her heart, and whispered, "You brought this late, but you brought it." Then she turned to me. "I want to read it inside, with the other women." And she did. We all sat in the living room that night, drinking tea while Joy read the words her son had never gotten the chance to say. "I love you even when I disappear. I see how hard you're trying. You were my safe place." We didn't speak for a long time after that. We just lit a candle for him. And for every other name not written on our walls but still carried in our hearts. That night, as I locked up the new still house, I stopped in the hallway, staring at all the colors, all the stories. I added one of my own. In blue chalk near the bottom I wrote, "Still growing, still grateful, still here." Because I was. And somehow so were all of us. The morning she showed up, the wind had that dry, restless feeling LA gets when the seasons try to change but forget how. We had 6 women at Cypress, 2 new intake calls, and I was elbow deep in a leaky faucet under the kitchen sink. When I came up for air, Carly was standing in the doorway with a strange look on her face. "There's someone outside," she said. She's been standing there a while." I wiped my hands and followed her to the porch. She was tall, mid-30s maybe. Hair pulled back into a severe bun, heavy black coat too warm for the weather, one arm wrapped tightly around her ribs like she was holding herself together by willpower alone. She didn't look up when I stepped outside. I spoke first. "Hi, I'm Hailey, can I help you?" She nodded once. Is this the place from the story?" I hesitated. "It depends which story." Her eyes flicked to mine, "The one where you kept the key and made it matter." I blinked. She continued, "I don't need a speech, I just need to come inside." I stepped back and opened the door. "Then come in." Her name was Elena. She didn't talk much that first night. She unpacked 2 t-shirts, a half-empty tube of toothpaste, and a sketchbook with a broken spine. She chose the top bunk near the window, sat with her knees to her chest, and stared out at nothing. Carly made her tea. Joy left her a note that said, "Sleep is sacred here." She didn't cry, she didn't ask for anything. But when I passed her in the hallway, she murmured, "I saw your lemon tree." I smiled. "It's stubborn like us." She gave me the smallest nod. It was enough. Over the next few days, she started to thaw, not like ice melts, but like stone slowly cracks under sun. She came to group dinners but stayed quiet. She didn't cook, but she helped clean. One morning, I found her in the backyard with a broom, gently sweeping fallen lavender petals into a pile. Not talking, just tending. Then one night, I walked into the kitchen to grab water and found her sketchbook open on the table. I paused. It was filled with portraits. All of us. Joy laughing with her tea mug. Liana braiding someone's hair. Me sitting on the porch steps, pen in mouth, notebook on my knee. They were gentle portraits, raw, loving. And on the last page, she'd drawn the lemon tree in full bloom. Underneath it, she'd written, "Still life, still living." I waited until morning to ask, "You're an artist?" She nodded. "Used to be." "What happened?" She looked away, a man who wanted me to stop. I didn't push. I just said, "You can be again here." She bit her lip. "Can I paint the stairwell?" It took me a second to register the question. "The stairwell. Just something soft, something quiet, I think it'll help." I smiled. "It's yours." The next 2 weeks, she worked like a woman possessed, headphones on, paint splattered on her jeans, the scent of citrus and acrylic filling the halls. She painted by moonlight mostly, said she liked how the silence held her brush steadier. The mural began slowly, vines curling along the baseboards, tiny glowing moths fluttering up the railing. Then came silhouettes, women walking upward, some carrying bags, some holding hands, all of them looking ahead. By the time she reached the landing, she had painted a massive, open doorway at the top of the stairs. Beyond it, sunlight. And above the doorframe in soft gold paint, she added the words, "There's more, keep going." When it was done, we stood in the hallway and stared in silence. Then Joy whispered, "I feel seen." Elena smiled. Not wide, not performative, but whole. That night, she placed a letter in my mailbox. It read, "I never believed I'd live long enough to contribute something. I thought my legacy would be silence. You gave me space to leave a mark. That's all any of us really need, isn't it? A wall, a brush, a place where our story gets to end on our own terms." I placed the letter inside the guidebook binder, under a new section we created just for her. Chapter 9: Making Space for Art. Creative expression isn't extra, it's essential. From then on, every still house included a blank wall, paint and brushes in a cabinet, no rules, just invitation. And the murals began multiplying. Santa Fe's house painted a phoenix. Milwaukee's house painted hands holding hands. Detroit's painted a lighthouse above a cracked ocean. Elena's work had sparked a movement. A month later, she got an offer. An art therapy center in Echo Park wanted to hire her to lead mural workshops for trauma survivors. Someone had seen the stairwell post I shared, reached out, asked for her. When I told her, she looked stunned. "I wasn't asking for a future," she said, "but I guess one came anyway." Her last night at Still House, we all gathered on the porch. Carly handed her a journal. Liana gave her a lemon blossom in a mason jar. Joy gave her a mug that said, "Art is a way home." I gave her a blank canvas. She just hugged me and said, "This place taught me how to be the page again." The next morning after she'd gone, I walked the stairwell alone. Stared at her words. "There's more, keep going." And I knew in my gut, in my ribs, in the soles of my feet. She was right. There was so much more. Still houses were growing. Still hearts were healing. Still stories were being told. And all of them began the same way. With a woman at a door. And someone inside saying, "Come in, there's room." Some stories arrive quietly, others walk through your door and rearrange everything. This one came in a cardboard box. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was sorting blankets at Still House Cypress when Zara called out from the front. "Hailey, there's a package here for you." I wiped my hands and walked to the door. It was just a plain brown box, no label, no return address. Just my name written in careful, delicate penmanship across the top. Hailey Norcrest. I brought it inside, half expecting donations, maybe canned food or some second-hand coats. But inside were 30 tiny glass jars. Each one sealed, each one hand-labeled in a soft script. Still Night 1. The first safe cry. Warmth I forgot I deserved. A bed finally. Permission to breathe. Candles, each one its own moment, its own memory, its own quiet revolution. There was no note inside, just the scents, lavender, eucalyptus, honey, and something else that felt like a hug from someone you'd forgotten you missed. I lined them on the windowsill. Carly joined me, then Joy, then Liana. One by one, the women came to stand in the quiet, watching the sunlight hit the jars like tiny stained glass stories. "It's her," Carly whispered, "the one who left in March, remember?" I did. She'd barely stayed 2 nights, never spoke more than 3 sentences, left behind a clean pillowcase and a folded napkin that read, "I'm sorry for taking up space." Now she'd sent us something sacred. A reminder, even when you don't think you matter, you leave warmth behind. That night we lit the candles. All of them. No electricity, no music. Just flame and breath and silence. The house glowed like a sanctuary. Not because of the candles, but because of what they held. Memory. And proof. Still House was growing, but not like an organization, not like a company. It was growing like a language. Each woman who came in added a word. A gesture. A ritual. Joy started folding the bath towels into origami birds. Zara labeled the kitchen jars in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Tagalog, and silence. Liana painted a sign for the new location that simply said, "You're not too much, you're just right here." We started printing quotes on the intake forms, not to decorate but to affirm. "You're not behind, you're beginning." Safety is not a luxury. Still doesn't mean stuck. and the walls began to fill with names again. Cards, notes, doodles, confessions. One said, April 29, you asked me nothing, and it healed everything. Another, K, I slept through the night, first time in 3 years. One more, Sabrina, I remember who I was. I stopped reading them as messages. They were mantras. The house didn't just hold us. It sang us back to ourselves. Then one day, I received a voice message from my mother. Not a call, not a text. A voice memo. I hadn't heard her voice in 6 months. I hesitated before pressing play. She sounded older, tired. Hi, Hailey. I saw the photo of the lemon tree on the website, the one with the paint chipping off the planter. It reminded me of the one you planted when you were 12. I never said anything back then, but I always loved how stubborn it was. Pause. I'm proud of what you've built. I was wrong before. About Brooke. About the way I let silence be easier than support. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I see you. I cried. Not the pretty kind. The ragged, open-throated, body-shaking kind. Because hearing that from her, it didn't erase everything, but it placed a hand on the wound. And I felt it begin to close. That week I returned to the original studio, alone. It was quiet now. We used it for overflow for emergency beds. The name wall took up almost the entire back wall. I stood there and stared for a long time. Then I pulled a pen from my pocket. It added my own name again. But this time not just Hailey Norcrest. I wrote, Hailey Norcrest, still here, still learning, still letting love in. Underneath, I added a sticky note with just one line. She forgave me in her own way, so I did too. That same weekend, we held our first Still House Circle. Not a fundraiser, not a press event. Just a gathering. Over 50 women, former residents, volunteers, new arrivals, all sitting under fairy lights in the backyard of the Cypress house. We drank tea, passed around journals, shared poems, laughed about kitchen accidents and bunk bed nightmares. Then in the quiet, Joy stood up and asked, What's one word you would use to describe this place, if it were a person? Someone called out, steady. Another, soft. Another, unshakable. I whispered, home. And they all nodded. Because it wasn't just 4 walls and a kettle anymore. It was a legacy. A memory still being written. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood on the porch and stared at the candle jars still flickering on the windowsill. One had burned all the way down. I picked it up. Read the label. The night I decided to live. I held it in both hands. Not like a souvenir, but like a torch. A light passed to me to hold and one day to pass on again. I used to think legacy was a heavy thing, a plaque, a courtroom victory, a headline, something etched in marble or scrolled across donation checks. But I know better now. Legacy is a bunk bed that doesn't squeak. It's tea left steeping on the counter. It's a lemon tree growing sideways into the sun. It's a woman whispering, I'm safe, to no one but herself. It's what stays when the story changes. A year after we opened the first Still House, we hosted a gathering. Not just for women who had stayed with us, but for those who built it without ever knowing they had. We called it the Still House Assembly. The backyard of our Cypress home overflowed with folding chairs and laughter. Women who had arrived carrying shame now passed around trays of cookies. One brought her baby, another brought her girlfriend. Joy made her famous chamomile lavender tea. Carly hung Polaroids on string lights like ornaments. Dia DJ'd from her phone with a playlist called We Survived, So We Dance. And somewhere between Zara performing a slam poem and Elena sketching portraits on napkins, I realized. This wasn't just healing. This was community. I gave a short speech that night, just a few words, nothing prepared. I was standing barefoot on the steps of the porch looking at faces I, once only seen in crisis and now saw fully alive. I thought Still House would be a place, I said, but it turns out it's a practice, a belief, that no one is too much, that starting over is sacred, that if you give a woman a door, she'll turn it into a gate. Someone called out, and then a garden. We all laughed. And I said, exactly. After the guests left and the candles burned low, I stayed behind. Just me and the lemon tree, now taller than I remembered. I touched its leaves, thought about every hand that had ever tended it. And I whispered, "You're the only thing Brooke ever gave me that turned out beautiful." I wasn't angry anymore. Not even bitter. Brooke would always be Brooke. But I wasn't her shadow. I was a lighthouse. Still house kept growing. By our second anniversary, we had 6 homes. By our third, we had 10. Detroit, Santa Fe, Oakland, Tulsa, Portland, Atlanta. Not all run by me, most weren't. They were led by women who had once curled into blankets in our hallways and now opened doors for others. I created the Still House Network, a collection of open-source resources, training weekends, seed grants. But I didn't call myself CEO. I called myself caretaker. Because that's what I did. I took care of what we built, of what we learned, of what still mattered. Then one day, a woman rang the doorbell of the Cypress house. She was middle-aged, hair graying at the temples, wore a red sweater and clutched her purse with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I answered. She said, "Is this Hailey Norcrest house?" I hesitated. "It's everyone's house, but I'm Hailey." She took a breath. "I'm Lana, Brooke's mother, your mother's friend." My stomach dropped. She continued, "I came to say something, if that's okay." I stepped onto the porch. "All right." She looked out toward the lemon tree, then back at me. "My daughter, she's not well, and I don't mean mentally, I mean spiritually. I see it now. I didn't before, but I do now." I stayed quiet. She pressed on. "I wanted to tell you that she still reads your interviews, listens to the podcast. She says she hates it, but she never misses one." She paused. "And the other day, she asked if lemon trees can grow from cuttings." I felt something shift in my chest. Lana reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "I don't know if this is what you need, but it's what I could do." She handed it to me and left. Inside the envelope was a check for $1,000. And a sticky note in Brooke's handwriting. "For whatever you plant next, maybe this time don't name it after me." I laughed. Then I cried. Because it was the closest thing to closure I'd ever get. And it was enough. The last time I stood in the original Still House studio, our first, it was just before we turned it into a permanent memorial site. We no longer used it for beds. It had become a living museum of sorts, the name wall preserved, the first bunk untouched, the mural still glowing in the stairwell. I walked from room to room, remembering the nights filled with whispered fears and morning breath and quiet hope. In the hallway, I stopped before a framed photo of our very first group. Carly, Maribel, Zara, Liana, me. I touched the glass and said out loud, "You started something, and it never stopped." On our 5th anniversary, we held a candlelight vigil. Each still house across the country lit 30 candles. One for each woman who passed through our doors that year. One for the ones still trying to get there. And one extra always for the woman who didn't make it. Her name unknown, her face unseen, but her story still honored. Because that's the promise. That even if you never get here, we carry you with us. Still House isn't about arrival. It's about remembrance. Now every new house adds their own motto to the front porch. Cypress says, "You made it." Detroit says, "Still awake." Portland says, "Enter softly." And the new one in Nashville, it says, "Leave when you're ready." Because healing doesn't come on a schedule. It comes like spring after an impossible winter. It comes like a lemon tree pushing through dry soil. It comes like a door that stays open. As for me, I'm still here. Not just physically, but fully. Alive in ways I never expected. Because the girl who was once a name on a fake deed became the woman who changed what deeds meant. Because she stayed. Because she opened. Because she turned betrayal into a bed for someone else. And because she never stopped believing in one simple truth. Every woman deserves a key. Especially to her own life.